So there's not a lot that we are going to cover in terms of electrical lightning injuries because there's not much to it. I think we can all recognize being struck by lightning or electrocuted is not good for us. What are the two types of current we have?
AC and DC.
Yeah, alternating and direct current. What's the difference between our alternating current and direct current?
Flips poles back and forth.
Yeah, so alternating basically flips poles back and forth when we have a constant cycling of the current. So we're looking at alternating current. We usually have some sort of conductor, some sort of capacitor that's going to, and it just alternates back and forth between this. And we're looking at alternating current. So if I'm working on that alternating current, and I decide that I'm going to grab onto it, what's the problem with it alternating back and forth? Yeah. So the problem with an alternating current is I just become part of that circuit. So it starts alternating instead of this part being the endpoint. I just become the endpoint, and it alternates through the body. And you get what's called the LockOn Phenomena. So that's when when you see like the cartoons when the guy reaches onto it and just gets locked on. That's exactly what happened. What happens is as we have that alternating current, it constantly stimulates tetanic contraction of our muscles, and as a result, we get contractions. If I was touching it with my hand locks on, and now I'm stuck there. And basically, it's going to continue on until either it shorts out, so if there's a safety mechanism on the circuit, it should short out and stop. And if it doesn't, then I'll just stay there getting electrocuted until I die. So that's what's happening with our AC current. So what's the difference between a DC current then?
Just one stimulation.
Yeah, so basically there's one stimulation. So it's something that's just directing one way. So I have electrical impulses traveling from whatever's creating the electrical impulse going towards wherever we want it to go. So what's the problem if I touch that current though?
It's like a through and through?
So it's kind of like a through and through. So it's similar to if I wanted to touch, if I got struck by lightning, right? So it's going to come down, it strikes me, and it's going to go straight through my body. And what's going to happen to my body? As that force is coming out into... What's that?
Isn't your body going around?
It technically acts as the ground as it accepts the current, and it'll exit through the ground. So that's where you get that entrance and exit wound, and it's going to throw me. So that's where you see, I don't know if you guys have ever seen a video, there's a video of a kid who loses their ball into one of those big electrical stations, and it arcs, so the current arcs out of the electrical station, hits the kid, and throws them like 200 feet. So the problem with DC current is, as I touch this, what happens is the current goes towards the body and can throw the person. So the person's at increased risk of traumatic injury. So a lot of people have the misconception that anyone who has an electrical injury needs to have spinal precautions taken on them. And I think the BLS says consider spinal precautions, and really it comes down to what type of current it is. Obviously, if the socket's over there and the guy's 50 feet from it, probably needs some sort of spinal mobilization. Not all AC current needs, people need spinal mobilization. When would they, or when could it cause a problem that requires spinal mobilization?
Cause like a secondary fall, like if they're at height.
Yeah, so that's part of it. Or with that lock on, my muscles contract so hard that old people's bones can actually break. So because the older people get, the more frail their bones we have, there is a potential that their muscles could contract so hard that they actually rip the bone apart. So there is the potential for injury there, but again, it's just something that we assess for and move on, right? So that's the difference between our AC and DC current. And we're talking about lightning strikes. I think in terms of voltage, lightning carries over 100,000 volts of electricity. I think 20,000 amperes of electricity, which is worse, right? The more amps you have, the more dangerous your electricity is. So obviously, it's very, very challenging to survive a lightning strike to begin with. But what do you think is going to make a difference? In any type of electrical injury, what's going to make a big difference for survival? You can't draw people.
Alien.
Yeah. Here you go. So the alien comes to Earth.
He gets electrocuted.
And gets electrocuted. Yeah. So he's spited. Obviously.
That's how Independence Day started.
That is exactly
So what's going to make a difference for someone's chance of survival with an electrocution. So we know amps and volts and all those types of things are going to make a difference. But in terms of where the lightning strikes me, why would it have a different chance of killing me?
Closer to the ground, the less traumatizing it is, 'cause it's less.
Sure, so if I have a closer ground, it might be less traumatizing to my body. And if you think about it, it also depends on which way it flows through my body. And generally, that's one of the main predictors of survival. So the reason why people often die when they, the alien's little brain, it's got a blue heart and lungs. So the problem with getting struck by lightning is as it travels through your body, it usually comes down vertically, right? So I'm usually standing, I get struck by lightning, and it travels vertically down the entirety of my body. Well, the problem with that is I have electrical current that now flows through all of my vital organs. So this guy has that increased risk of having death to all of those organs that are involved because it's traveled straight down through them. We generally see fewer, or I guess it's less life-threatening for people to sometimes lock onto something or have DC current that they're connecting with their hand, because although it is traveling through the heart and lungs, it is only going through basically 2 of our vital organs. So it can affect heart and lungs, and it can miss one of them depending on the path that the current goes. So one of the things that makes a difference is where the entrance is, right? So if you're seeing someone who's, for example, head is your entrance, and you've got exit down the foot, you know that person probably had affected, or the electricity affected all of their vital organs. That person has decreased chance of survival. So if we look at the brain, what's going to happen as electricity strikes or stimulates the brain? What's going to happen when electricity stimulates any of my neurons or cells? What's it similar to? Yeah, very similar to excitation. So what can happen in the brain is you have massive action potential, which is always followed by hyperpolarization, right? Now in this case, you have to think about what's happening. It's not just my everyday run-of-the-mill action potential where it fires, I go up to around positive 50, and I drop back down. This is a case where I've had massive depolarization of cells. So I've had probably one of the largest stimuli that I can have to cause an action potential. So the risk of severe hyperpolarization is really high. So I get massive action potential followed by large hyperpolarization. So if you think about the consequences of that, it's just severe CNS depression, right? Basically, think about what happens when you cardiovert someone. You cardiovert them, and you see that period of asystole that's occurring after the cardioversion. And we're doing that at 200 or 360, especially that happening at 10,000 volts, right? So it's just a huge difference. So the change is exponential. So there's a large hyperpolarization, and it can be to the point where we completely screw up the transition of electrons. So we might not be able to get back to normal neuronal function. Same thing's happening in the heart. So what might we see on the ECG for this patient? Followed by hyperpolarization.
VTAC.
So at low currents, we generally see VTAC or VF. So at a lower current, I might be stimulating, just like defibrillating during the relative refractory period, you might get VTAC or VF. So at lower currents, I get VTAC or VF. What do you think might happen at a higher current? If I have that massive depolarization, patient going into asystole. This is where they talk about reverse triage when people are struck by lightning, because the dead person may just spontaneously come back to life. So this is one of the only patients who has a chance of actually coming back from an asystole, because the heart might just get the electrolytes back in the right place, SA node can start doing its job again, and you can see the person actually have adequate conduction occurring again. So hyperpolarization, so we might see...
Sorry, is hypo in both cases or hyper?
Sorry, hyperpolarization. Yeah, hyperpolarization. So VF or VT, that's at low voltage. And if we hit the relative refractory period, at high voltage, we'll likely to see asystole that may convert spontaneously. Part of the problem with having this large current flow through our conduction system, though, is you can have damage to it. So, as we normally have conduction through the heart, what may happen is we have some sort of ischemia or damage to the SA node, AV node, or the fibers that they're using as the pathway. And what can happen is I get damage, so you can start seeing arrhythmias where the patient didn't normally have them. So, AFib is often common after this because we get destruction of the SA node, and we have little guys taking over instead. So you might see arrhythmia. Due to damage of the conduction pathway. What's the other big problem with electrocution?
Burns.
Burns, yeah. So a lot of times what happens is as electricity moves through the body, if it moves through something with lower impedance, or for example your bones, it's harder for electricity to move through my bones than it is to move through my vessels, for example. Think about it, it's easier for electricity to move through water, not as easy as it to move through, say, mud or something like that. So the problem with that is as the electricity moves through my bones, it's moving much slower with higher resistance, and it creates much more heat. So as a result of that excessive heat production, we can actually see basically an increase in temperature within the body itself and destruction of the vessels and the blood. So you can get coagulation or internal burns. So someone may just have an entrance and an exit wound present on them, but they may have extensive internal burns related to the lightning strike itself. Does that make sense? That's it.
So,
Cool. Thanks, Dale.
No problem.